If you're still using tools like ChatGPT on their own, you're barely scratching the surface of what AI can actually do for a business. And in 2026, that gap does matter. So after watching this video, you'll be able to build real AI automations that businesses will pay thousands for. Just like Veronica, who started from zero and now sells automations to businesses for tens of thousands. Or you'll be able to implement them inside your own company and save a huge amount of time and cost, like Oliver, who automated all his lead outreach through LinkedIn and saves himself 15 hours per week. So this video is designed to take you from a complete beginner right through to mastering real business automation using n8n 2.0, the latest version. In this video, I'm putting everything together into one clear path, showing you how these systems are actually built and used in the real world. And by the end, I'll walk you through 2 workflows that n8n is genuinely better at than ChatGPT, so you can apply this immediately, either in your own business or for your clients. So what could you achieve with AI automation, and what actually is it? So I guess the real question we're going to be answering today is, how does workflow automation take you further than the conversations you've been having already probably with ChatGPT? Well, it's all about connecting between the systems you use every single day, using no code, absolutely zero code, and visual drag and drop blocks. So it literally gives you the power of being a developer without having to spend the years learning how to code. It's as powerful. So I run a school community with over 600 members, and here are just a few examples of the things other business owners and other aspiring agency owners have achieved within just a month or two of consistent efforts using AI automation, often starting from exactly the same point with no experience, no technical background necessary, and never having sold anything. So we've got Matt here, who does YouTube live streams as part of his weekly content, but he's never recreated content from it, or he was manually doing it before. So now he takes the YouTube transcript, has the AI summarize it, and then the summary is converted into a brand new podcast episode, as well as a blog post. And he uses AI to generate the image as well. So he says, I was probably spending a couple of hours each Friday night on this. Now it's just a few minutes to start the automation. So reclaiming time within a couple of weeks. We've got Daniel, who's just secured his first client and been paid. Their problem was simple but annoying. Products go in and out of stock, but Shopify doesn't know about it. So what he's done is build a workflow that basically checks the supplier inventory against Shopify, and then products that are available get published automatically. Products that are blocked get hidden automatically from their website. So super simple, but makes a big difference to his client. And this is the kind of stuff you can build and get paid for, or save you a ton of time in your own business. Mario gained the confidence and skills to go and sell his first AI automation client. We've got Julian, who not only has landed a full-time AI automation role, but actively is taking on other side projects as well with new clients. We've got Brianne, who after her first week in the community and learning n8n was able to actually generate podcast content, which cuts down the time she's spending on actually creating that content. And then we've also got Oliver here, who literally now spends no time on his LinkedIn outbound. He's automated absolutely everything. So connection requests for anyone that likes his posts, engagement, so actually commenting things, and they don't sound like AI either. He's made them sound human, and actually then sending messages at scale, but also not aggressively, so he doesn't get blocked on LinkedIn. And it's normal at this point to be thinking, I still don't really know what I'd automate, because it's actually hard to know what you'd automate until you know what is possible and have played around with the tools we're going to show you today. But if you watch the next 2 hours, I'm going to give you 2 workflows that you can take away today that are way better than what you can achieve on ChatGPT by yourself, so that you can actually go away and apply them. After that, you'll have a much better understanding of what else you would want to start automating to buy back more time. So to have any chance of making that, you're going to need to understand how n8n works. So let's get into the interface. So n8n at a glance is flexible AI workflow automation, which sounds like a bunch of jargon, but what it means is these drag and drop workflow blocks that connect to your tools. So it's got over 500 inbuilt integrations. So we've got things like Airtable, Excel, Google Calendars, Outlook, OpenAI, anything you could want. Asana, you can connect to here. It's the fast way to actually get AI working in your business. And I've seen lots of business owners do this. It's incredibly quick to start using AI inside your business using a platform like this. It gives you the flexibility of code when you want to do it, but actually most of it's on the UI with drag and drop blocks, which is amazing. And it's completely secure. It's reliable. It's collaborative. I've been using it for nearly 2 years now. and I cannot recommend it more. And it finishes off with, there's nothing you can't automate with n8n. And this is what I tell people too. Literally anything you want to do is possible via n8n. So to get here, you're going to go to https://n8n.partnerlinks.io/scrapes.ai. That is an affiliate link. So if you want to just go straight to the website, just go to n8n.io and you're going to land on this page. And unfortunately, we hit a problem straight away, which is there's two different ways of running it, either self-hosting it or you run it through the n8n cloud. For now, we're just going to use the cloud to get started quickest. So you're going to click on get started and you're going to go through the process of filling out your name, etc. And then you're going to start your 14-day free trial. Then you'll go through the setup questions and you can click start automating. Now, once you're in, you get greeted with this interface. My personal preference is to go down here to settings, go on personal and change it to light theme. This just makes it a lot easier for me to see. And then you have multiple options. Try an AI workflow, start from scratch, or start with a template. And they have lots of brilliant templates you can start with, but I'd recommend learning the basics first. Now, we mentioned there were two ways to set this up, through cloud like we've just done, and then self-hosting. There are benefits to self-hosting, but we'll talk about that later. So let's now talk about what a workflow is comprised of and what it actually looks like. So if we click on start from scratch, we're delivered to what's called the n8n canvas, and we're going to create a series of actions that take place in apps or on this n8n canvas. So as an example, we can actually hit tab on our keyboard or the plus icon here or add a first step. It's going to ask us what's actually going to be the trigger for this to happen. So triggers are just when the workflow starts. So are we going to trigger it manually in the workflow? Is it going to be, for example, when an email arrives in our Gmail or Outlook, which would be an on-app event, and we can add those to the workflow. So we click on the button, it will add it automatically to the workflow, and we can drag and drop those. We'll go up to the nodes panel again, hit add another trigger, and actually maybe let's go on the app event and type in Gmail and then on message received. As soon as you click that, it's going to open up the node itself, and we're going to have inputs on the left-hand side, data transformation in the middle, and then outputs on the right-hand side. Don't worry too much about that because we'll come back to it in a moment. Or we might instead actually trigger it on a schedule. So it might be actually every day at midnight we want to run this. So we've got the schedule trigger here. Or the other most important one is actually on a webhook call. So this is just when we're sending a request from another service for this workflow to start. And again, if we click that, it will open up and we have the inputs, the transformation we're going to do on it, and the outputs there. So let's say we actually are triggering this based on an email arriving. Then what we might have is some sort of data transformation. So if I connect this up to my email, I can sign in with Google directly here, give it the correct access, and it will say connection successful. I've now connected it to that, and I can basically fetch a test email. And if I run that test event, I will see that we have the inputs on the left-hand side, which is just nothing because this is going to be the starting node. What we're doing, which is actually polling our email every single minute for a message received. And then we are outputting a table of data. So we have different bits of information, how big the email is in bytes, the snippet, which is a preview of the message. And then if we scroll over, we get to see the from email as well. And this is just an email about or from our n8n cloud account saying that we've given it access to Google, which we just did. So if we close that, we can come out onto the canvas and we can see that that node has now run. It's got that green parameter around it. What we might want to say, if the message contains a no reply in the from box, then actually we don't want to create a draft for this. So we'd go in here, we'd go into the nodes panel again, and now we're actually looking at logic or actions that we can take place. So we want to transform the data that's come in into a usable format. So what we're going to do is click on flow, and we're going to use this if node, which is a really popular node. And you can see again, we've got the inputs, the transformation, the outputs. Really important to remember that. And we're just going to connect it up by dragging and dropping on the canvas between those. So now what we can do is instead of running this every single time, we can click on the little dots up here or P on our keyboard and pin the data. And all that's going to do is keep this data here every time we run this in test mode, so that actually that data is always passed through. So we're never having to worry about, hang on, the email's now changed in our test environment. What we're doing is just connecting that test email to this if node. So now I can hit execute workflow from Gmail trigger, or I can highlight above this little orange toggle here and hit execute workflow. And now what we'll see is the data is now passed one item of data into this next node. So we get this sequential flow left to right of data. Now I've not put any transformation or conditions in here, but what we said from before was actually that we've got our input on the left, and we can see a view here where we've got all the different field names and the field types, which we'll come back to, as well as the example that we saw in here. So we've seen that this has come from no reply accounts.google.com. So I can actually just literally drag and drop this over here. But let's think about what we're actually trying to do here. We are trying to say if the email or the from box down here contains the words no-reply, then we want it to not go through. So we're going to drag and drop this from value over here into this box. And then suddenly this will turn into an expression of data. Don't worry about this now. We will come back to this. It's very straightforward. Just drag and drop right now. So we're going to say, actually this from box, which if we click on, we can see the value here. If the string or the text contains no-reply, then it's going to appear true. So actually we'll put does not contain no-reply, and it should now go to the false branch. If we re-execute this step up here, you can see that because it contains no reply, it will be now false. So we'll come back to the canvas, and actually if we run this again, you can see it's now passed through this false branch. So what we're showing you here is actually you can do different things based on conditions. We've not transformed any data yet, but what we're doing is taking an action based on conditions. So if the email does not contain no reply, what do we want to do? Potentially create a new draft. So we're going to hit Gmail and we're going to create a draft as the action there. And whatever we last clicked on, if we're then creating a node, it's going to automatically connect to that arm. That's why we didn't have to drag the true arm to this create draft. But if we double click on the create a draft node, we can see that there's no input because actually it wasn't given any input through the true branch there. But if we connect it to the false branch, we'll see that actually from the previous node, the if branch, we can see the inputs there. So all of this comes to show you that actually a workflow is just a series of actions taking place with data that works inside our apps. In this case, the apps are things that we use every day, like Gmail, Outlook, Airtable, and you can go into the node panel and see all the different ones you can use here. Asana actions, AWS, Dropbox, Bubble, Cow.com. It's literally so many things that have inbuilt nodes inside n8n here. And one of the key things you need to remember is that everything is just made up of inputs, some sort of data transformation, and outputs. So we have the inputs on the left, the data transformation in the middle, and the outputs. That is how we break down every single workflow. Now we can come up here and name our workflow. We'll call it demo of triggers, because I'd recommend actually naming everything really specifically. Otherwise, you're just going to have a series of workflow 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And we can basically save it by clicking the button up here. So within those inputs, data transformation, and outputs, there's basically different ways to represent the data. We've already seen this schema view, which shows us all of the different field titles and their data types. So these are strings, which we'll come to, but it's just text. We've got a number here, which is the size estimate. We've got an array, which is a list of things. And then we've got an object, which we'll also come to as well. But we can also see the data in this table format, which automatically showed us on the right-hand side. So we could see the output in that schema view as well, or in its raw data format, which n8n uses on the back end, which is JSON data. So this looks a bit confusing if you're from a non-technical background at first, but it's actually very simple to understand. We've basically got the different keys or parameters here, and then any values that sit inside those. So for example, we've got the from box that we saw on the left-hand side, and it's got the text of the no reply.accounts.google.com. And we can always go back to the canvas by clicking up here and make sure that's saved. Now, as we've already seen, data is stored as JSON. JSON just stands for JavaScript Object Notation. And if you understand this next bit, you're already well ahead of most others learning n8n. So we have a note here with our node, and this is just called a set node where we can set any data we want. We've put it in JSON mode, and we've got this JSON object, and we can tell that because it's got these curly brackets on the outside. And we've got those key value pairs that we saw before. So we've got the key of ID and then a number 1 as the value here, or first name as the ID and Sarah as a text value here. And you can see they can have different formats. This one doesn't have the exclamation marks, which signifies it's actually not text. And JSON is just a way of writing this down so that a computer can understand exactly what data we're passing in. And it's as simple as that. So imagine, like we just saw, a contact card where we have different attributes or keys, as we called them: ID, first name, last name, email, company, and phone number. And then all we're doing is just wrapping that to make it an object or a JSON object in these curly braces. Now, why do we actually care about that? Well, if we understand the data structure, there are only a limited number of things we need to do to learn to manipulate that data. And if all data is in that JSON format that we saw before, and we execute this and we see the output in the JSON format, then if we learn how to manipulate all those different types of JSON, we can literally deal with any data that comes from any of our systems. But also, we need to know that because we can pass the data between our connected apps by referencing it dynamically. So if I connect these two here, we will basically, if we run and execute this step, we can see the input here. All it's going to do is just pass through the all output fields here. But what if I wanted to actually just pass through the name Sarah, for example? We can either go in the table view here and drag and drop it onto here, or I can actually go into this field directly. And then if I drop the last name in here too, it's going to automatically jump to what's called an expression rather than a string. So I could naturally be like, okay, Sarah is in there and have this fixed value as Sarah, and then a fixed value of Johnson. And we execute the step and it will pass through just the JSON object with the first name and last name, Sarah Johnson. But if I pass another name in there, we've basically manually typed in, hard coded Sarah Johnson. What if I wanted this data to adapt to anything? Then what I can do is just drag in this first name in here, and you can see it switches from fixed to expression to say, actually from the JSON on our input, we want to grab the first name. And all we'd have to do is actually change that to last name, because that's the key for the last name for it to show Johnson. And we can see for all of the different items that are input there, the demo output, which would be Johnson. So if I wanted to just drag a new field in here, I could actually just drag it directly into here and it would say email and then json.email. Now, the more foolproof way of doing this is actually to use brackets notation and say, from this earlier node, contact card dot item, I want to pull from this item, the contact card item, I want to pull the last name from the JSON. That's a much better way to do it, because actually if you have a node in between here and you use the JSON terminology like email, then it's not going to know to pull from the contact card item, which was earlier on in the workflow. So that's pulling dynamic data, and we always use this dollar notation. So if I click equals on here, it will automatically turn into that dynamic data expression, and I'll put the two curly braces to say, actually, we want to pull data. And you can see n8n starts suggesting that we pull data from the previous JSON, and we've got various different functions that we can use in here. But for now, we'll just say, actually, we want to pull it from the contact card, which was the earlier. You can see, okay, it recognizes in the contact card, we've got a JSON object. So we always hit .item and then .json. And now we can see actually all of the attributes inside that JSON. We can see the ID, the first name, the last name, the email. So if I wanted to grab the email, I just put .email. And it might look confusing at first. This is JavaScript notation, but actually all we're doing is saying inside this block object, I want to grab this attribute. So it's like inside this block object, inside the JSON, which are the curly brackets, I want to grab the email. So does it get any more complicated than that? Well, data isn't usually just one value like we've seen here, where one item is being passed through. It's usually multiple items with multiple characteristics. Sometimes we have more complicated data. So we can actually store lists of information in these square brackets. So we have the curly brackets, which are objects or JSON objects, and we have the square brackets, which are called arrays, or they're actually just lists. We know them as lists. So for example, we could have a fruit array, which actually, if we go into, we just have a list of fruits in this square brackets notation, apple, pear, banana in that square brackets, and we just give it the array type because we know it's a list. If we execute the step there, we can see that it's still a JSON object because n8n always deals with JSON, but inside the schema, we can see that actually we've got a fruit array or list, and fruit 0 is apple, fruit 1 is pear, and fruit 2 is banana. It starts from 0 because computers start from 0. It's the index. The index is 0. And if we go into the table, we can see one column and one row with 0, 1, and 2 there. Or if we wanted more attributes inside there, instead of just the names of the fruit, then we would call it a JSON object itself. So if we click inside this, we have the JSON curly brackets. We have a list of fruits, which are denoted by those square brackets. And then inside that, we have JSON objects. We have the name apple, color green, name pear, color green. So it's just a list, which is kept. It's just an object here inside the curly brace, inside a list. So we've got multiple objects inside the list. And if we execute the step, we can see again, we've got the 0th, the 1st, and the 2nd objects inside there. And all we need to do is actually to reference that in the same way, we can grab the dynamic data, pull it across here. So that is slightly more complex in its structure. And then let's go back to our contact object. So you can remember we had the ID, first name, last name, email, etc., and see what this looks like with multiple contacts. So instead we might have these contacts as leads, where we have each contact is a separate object. So we've got Sarah Johnson up there, Michael Chen, Jessica Williams. And if we run through that, we've got basically one column, one row in a table of leads where we've got to probably split out that data a bit more later on. And that's as complicated as it gets. That is the hardest part about learning n8n, is understanding how to manipulate those JSON structures. And it takes a bit of practice, which we will run through later. So don't worry if you didn't get that first time. It probably took me around 3 months to understand these concepts and start using them properly inside n8n. And if you did get that first time, then amazing, you're well ahead on your journey to learning n8n, and you'll be automating stuff in no time. So let's take it one step up a little bit, go back to some broader concepts. Now we understand the underlying JSON structure. Let's talk through some workflow quick tips, which are absolutely going to be a game changer in understanding n8n. This is all about understanding the 20% of n8n that's going to take you furthest, quickest. So first up, we have flow, direction, and order. So we have a bunch of nodes on here, and you need to know that they operate from left to right, top to bottom. So if we bring our manual trigger down here, we'll connect it to both of these flows because we can have them running at the same time. You will see that it operates, and we click execute workflow. You'll see that it's operated the first workflow at the top, left to right, and then now it's operating the bottom one. If we run it again, you'll see the top one immediately runs through very quick. And then the bottom one is now running through this second branch. So left to right, top to bottom. By default, n8n executes the nodes synchronously, one after another, not in parallel. So if we look at this second flow, you will see that this example data immediately runs, and then the wait node after it. Running, and then that will complete. And now it will run those two after it. Nodes will run once per input. So if you put 5 things in the input, let's say here we have a leads list that we saw earlier with 5 different leads, and we're splitting out those leads, that will run 5 times. So if we execute the workflow here, you'll see 1 item's passed here because we've got 1 list. We split out that data into 5 items, and you can see that we've got the individual rows now of the table. That's data transformation in the process. We've got 1 coming from the bottom. So 6 items are passed through this route in total. We can branch workflows. So you can split that into multiple paths using conditions. So we saw earlier what a condition looked like. If this is the case, then take this action. So actually we can have, if this is the case, take the true route. If this is not case, take the false route. If we want to have more than 2 options there, we can use the switch node and we can add a routing rule for a fair few number of routes. And you can see that we've got like 4 or 5, different outputs there. Now publishing is brand new to n8n 2.0, and there's some important things you need to know about it. If you want anything external to run, then you need to publish the workflow. But you can see if I highlight above that now, this workflow has no trigger nodes that require publishing. And that's just because we've got this manual trigger node. So if we've got a manual trigger, we're always going to run this inside as a test. But if we've got a trigger that's supposed to happen externally, let's say a time-based trigger, like a schedule trigger that happens once at midnight every single day, if we bring that in and connect that up, then we're basically saying once a day at midnight, run this. But it's not going to run unless we publish the workflow. So we can click on publish, we can describe our changes and give it a version name if you want to. I just leave the default and we'll click publish. Now you can basically see that actually that is now published by this tick, and it's this version BF0345A. Now what that means is now every single day at midnight, unless I unpublish this by going to the 3 dots and clicking unpublish, this is going to run by default. Now the big change between n8n 1.0 and n8n 2.0 is actually this used to be an activate button, and as soon as you saved any changes to this workflow, it would effectively be republished. Now that's not the case. Let's say actually we want an Airtable trigger now. If I click on Airtable, go down to triggers, and I want it to run every time a field changes in Airtable. Instead of our schedule trigger, I'll just deactivate these by highlighting and clicking D. Then if I save it, it's still going to run every day at midnight through the schedule trigger. And why is that? That's because we've not republished. So we just need to put in some example data here. So if we save it, it's not going to republish automatically. So we can make changes before we push things live to production. But if we did want to push it live, then what we would hit is publish, and we've got the new version, and we'd say added Airtable trigger. And now as soon as we publish that, it's going to now reactivate based on the Airtable trigger and no longer the schedule trigger. So again, we'll deactivate that workflow. Let's save it. And you can see at the moment it's not published because we've got no triggers that require publishing, but we can republish it with our schedule trigger there. But for the sake of this, I'm going to unpublish it now, and we'll talk about the next step, which is execution data. So we've run this a few times now, and it's always important to see what data actually has run through the process. So we can go into the executions tab up here, which is the first time we're seeing it. And we can see where we've done test executions because they've got this lab symbol here. And actually, if we click on it, we can zoom in and see the previous execution here. Or we can go in here and see actually where earlier we executed just the fruit array. So you can see all of the executions here, and inside n8n you can set by default how many executions it will save, whether it saves just the ones that fail, whether it saves all successful ones. And those are really important settings for you. But the important thing is you can see where things have gone wrong. So when we have a fault in there, you can see exactly which node failed, what was the data that caused it to fail, and then fix that. And the way that you do that is effectively by using this copy to editor button. So if we click copy to editor, it's going to push all of the data that we used in that run back through so that we can click through the nodes and see the data that was passed through. Incredibly powerful. Now we've seen nodes, but one thing you need to know is how to rename nodes. So if you double click on a node, you can go up here and actually rename it directly, or hit on a node and click the space bar on your keyboard and we can rename it here. The importance there is that you give it an actual name that represents what it's doing. When you come back to your workflows later, this will be incredibly confusing if you haven't given them individual names, like if this is true, or split out the data, or example data. And finally, we saw this already, but it's important to know what it was. If we reopen the Gmail node, for example, and we click any of these actions, we saw that we created a credential. So when we clicked on here, we created a new credential, and we connected it to our account here, you will go through and connect to multiple services whilst you use n8n, and those will be stored as credentials. So we can basically go back to our personal account and we can see in the homepage here, we've got folders if you have built multiple automations and put them in folders. We've got credentials, we've got the previous executions of all of our workflows. And all of your credentials will be stored inside here securely so that nobody can see them if you copy and paste your workflows. And that means inside any workflow, we can re-access that specific Google Mail account that we've connected or whatever account we've connected there. And as you can see in every workflow that I do, I add these notes. So if you go to the notes panel and type in note, or just hit Shift and S, it will open up a new note. And you can see that actually if we double click on here, we can write these notes using this markdown notation. So if we want a title, we use double hashtag, bold, we use the stars, and it's got a little link to the guide here if you want to understand the formatting. But the main importance of this is in any workflow that I do, I annotate it so that I can come back and understand exactly what happens. So I'll put a title and I'll put a subheading saying what that part of the workflow did. So when I come back, it's really easy to maintain. Now, because we're often working with large data sets that come from our business systems, it's useful to know how to split it out and merge it all back together so that we can manipulate those specific fields. So we've got the example here of the data of the leads again. If we execute it, you get one row, one column with the list that we mentioned before. So we've got 0, 1, 2. And this is the table view as well. So the JSON view is this. And then the schema, you can see we have basically this array of different leads, which is like objects. This little cube is an object, which we can see by the JSON object notation there. So what we'd want to do if we were to manipulate this is actually use this split out node. And you can access that by going to the nodes panel, typing in split, and it says turns a list inside items into separate items. And all we're going to say is actually which field do we want to split out? We actually want to just split the leads out and no other field should be carried forward. We don't have any other fields anyway. If we execute that step, you can see it's transformed that one item up here into 5 items. So now we've got 5 individual objects and we go to the table data and we've got those individual rows there. What that means now is actually we can see inside the edit field or set node that the input is now 5 items and we're going to do 5 manipulations on it. So if we wanted to, for example, use dynamic data to get the full name rather than just first name and last name, we could type in full name here and then we would put, for example, drag this across first name, comma, last name. As long as this is an expression down here, it will automatically pull through. Otherwise, if we put it as fixed, it will just appear, if we execute this step, as 5 lots of the code there. But if we put it as an expression, we execute the step, it's going to pull through all other fields, but we now have an additional field of full name, Sarah, comma Johnson, Michael, comma Chen, etc. as well. So this split out node is all about flattening a data structure, turning them into individual rows. And most of your systems won't share them as individual rows because they have lots of objects nested inside each other, lots of attributes. So you'll often have to split it out to work with the data. And that's what we've done here. Now, if you want to put it back in your system, you might need to transform that back. And therefore, we'd use something like the aggregate node, where we're actually saying, do the opposite now. We have a bunch of leads in here, but what we want is to actually just specify the first name and last name into an aggregate list. And if we execute that step, we now have the reverse, which is a JSON with the leads with just the first name, last name, etc. Or instead of that, we could say, put all fields back in. And actually now we have the original array that we had before. You can see that on the schema where we have our leads object. Now that is the bulk of what you need to know for data transformation. And then there is the possibility to custom manipulation for more complex transformations. If we connect all these up here, you'll be able to see actually we can achieve the same output but with custom code. So don't worry about the details of this, but we're using JavaScript to basically say for all of our inputs, check if the full name field exists, remove the comma and any extra spaces between the full name. And then if the full name doesn't exist, then create it. So what we're basically saying is get rid of the comma that we've just added. And you can see that we're going to put that in a new field called full name new. And you can see it's removed the comma there. But the point is not to understand the JavaScript code. The point is that we can do custom data manipulation, so we can manipulate it any way we want. Now, when we're dealing with external systems, or there's not an inbuilt n8n node, we need to understand how to get that data sent to us or retrieve it ourselves. So this is where it comes into what's called a HTTP request, or if we want to just connect to any external API or service. And then if we want to send data to ourselves, we use what's called a webhook, which is almost like the inverse of a HTTP request. You get it by going up here and typing HTTP, and you can see it's got this globe-like network symbol up here. And let's deactivate these to show you exactly how that works. And it's actually very, very simple. So let's say we wanted to retrieve data from an external website. And if we go to this dummyjson.com/docs/products, this is a website designed to actually, that we can just not add any credentials. So we don't need any passwords, any sign-ins. We can basically just fetch data and it will give us some data from these what are called endpoints. And what you need to know about this right now is that there are multiple ways in which we can interact with these external services. And a node that we've talked through so far is just doing the same on behalf of us. So say, for example, we want to use the Gmail node and we are creating a draft email. All this is actually doing on the back end is using a HTTP request to contact the API of Google with your credentials to take an action. But when that's not available, when it's not built in, we have to do that ourselves through a HTTP request. But it means we can connect to any service very, very simply. So what we're doing is actually getting data from this, but we can also push data. We can update data like creating a draft email, and that is called post. So we have these in capitals, get or post, and there's a few others like delete or patch to update, but get and post is what you're going to use the most here. So we're using this URL, which is called an API endpoint, which basically just says from this URL, let's pull the data. So if we execute that step, you can see that the URL has come back, or the response from the HTTP request or API request has come back with lots of details of products. And that's because what we're doing is basically saying, give us the entire product list that you've got. Or we could say, actually, we just want a single product. So we can append a /1 to the end, and it will just return us a single product now, which is the Essence mascara, etc., etc. So we are getting data from there. And when you're doing this with services that you deal with, you'll often add this authentication, which is just going to be the API key to connect and make sure or certify that it is actually you. Let's deactivate that one whilst we're not using it. And if we go and open this HTTP request here, we've got actually a new endpoint, which is adding products. So on this API documentation here, we can see all the different things that we can do, and we can actually add a new product, and it just says it will not add it into the server, but it will simulate a post request and will return information back to us. So we can simulate adding a product here. And let's say actually we want to add a BMW pencil with the price of 1.05. So we've got the different body parameters in here. So let's talk through the different parameters that we're sending. Instead of the get request, we're now posting because we're sending data. We're using that endpoint that we spoke about. And actually here, we don't need a credential type at all because there's no credentials to add things here. It's just a fake endpoint. We have multiple things that we can send as part of our request. One of them is our authentication to certify it's us. Another is a query parameter. So a query parameter is when you see the question marks on the end of parameters. We're not going to worry about query parameters now, or even headers. So those are toggled off, but headers are something we send as data as part of the request we're sending. But we will send a body because we're sending the data. So we're sending a JSON body using the fields below, and we can define their keys and values. So the name will be title, for example, and the value will be BMW pencil. The name will be price and 1.05. We could define this as a JSON object, but it's nice in n8n to just define it as these fields, and it automatically puts it into JSON. Now I know these fields, title and price, because I've looked at the API documentation and I've seen that actually we can add title and then price or any other data that we want to there. And they use the same example here. So if I go and execute that step, what I'm saying is add a BMW pencil to that and return to me that it is successful. So if we execute the step, it will return the ID of the product that we just added, the title and the price. But we know it's fake because actually if we try and return the ID or try and get the information using our previous request, using our /195, we're using the get method, it should not actually be found because what we've just done is a fake addition to that there. So that is get and post requests. Now to simulate actually sending data back to ourselves, we can use these two nodes here. The first is another HTTP request to send data. What we're going to see is that actually in our executions, we receive that data back in our webhook. You can think of a HTTP request as asking a question to a service like this dummy JSON product and getting a response. So we're polling that service, but actually a webhook is when something's pushed to us. So we can actually simulate pushing data to ourselves using the HTTP request and then see it received through a webhook, which would be a trigger potentially for another service. So think of this like if you have a service that receives customer payments through Stripe, you could activate your workflow based on a Stripe webhook. So Stripe will say, as soon as a payment is made, we're going to ping Simon's workflow because we know he's got a webhook set up to receive data as soon as we've received a purchase, and we're going to send him that information. And then I'm going to use that information inside my n8n workflow to go and contact the customer with their order confirmation or something like that. But what we're doing here is simulating actually our own webhook address. So if we click into the webhook here, we've got these webhook URLs, which are the endpoints that we keep referencing. And what we're saying is actually, let's take the production URL, let's copy that by just clicking on it. And actually all we're going to do is say we're going to send data to that address, which is our own URL. There's no authentication required. So actually we can take away that authentication and just use none there. And what we're going to do is just send the generic headers content type application/JSON. And that's just saying we expect a response in JSON and the body. So we're going to send the title and the price again. And what we're going to do is just save. We're going to make sure this workflow is published because if I send this without publishing, it's going to say the resource you're requesting has not been found. And that's because we've not published the workflow, so it's not externally accessible. But if we publish the workflow again and try that again, it's now said the workflow has started. So I can see this published, I can see something has happened, but I can't see any green light on the webhook. So what I need to do is go to the previous executions and I will see that the webhook will have executed. If I zoom in down here, I can see that the webhook has been executed. The webhook trigger has been executed by this HTTP request. And if I double click inside it, I can see that inside the body of the request, there was the title, BMW pencil, and the price, 1.05. And then a bunch of stuff that we don't control, which is like telling us this is where the data has come from. And we've got no other parameters other than the title and price in the body. And again, we can copy that to the editor to see it directly in here, but sometimes it glitches out. So it's showing us just the previous execution there. Now, every other API connection request you make will be made with an API key or authentication. So it's useful to see that. So from the webhook point of view, I can basically add a, let's say, header auth. And if we create a new credential in here called API_key and add a value, and we'll just add any random value here, and we'll say it's the webhook demo header authentication. So we're basically saying to access or to send data to me, you're going to need to certify that you are a user that's allowed to do so. using the same key that I'm going to match here on the response. And now we're saying inside the webhook, you need to authenticate if you're going to get a response from me. So look what happens if we don't add an authentication. It's going to reject us. Or actually, we need to come and publish first. And let's try again. There we go. Authorization data is wrong. We know that we've sent no credentials here. Whereas if we actually add that credential, then what we're going to do is choose a generic credential type. We know it's a header auth, and you don't need to worry about the differences now for this. But what we know is that we've added this webhook demo header authentication. And if we look inside there, it's our API key and it's encrypted our value. If we execute that step, and I've just gone back, so it wasn't working for some reason. So I've changed the authentication to webhook demo instead. And you can see here webhook demo. And now when we execute the step, it's going to say workflow has started. And actually, that is the response that we've basically given the webhook to give back to us. Now, you're probably thinking, oh, we haven't even touched AI yet. How does that fit in? Well, n8n has adapted to the rise of AI extremely well, which means it's one of the most popular platforms out there. And they've made specific nodes to make our workflows agentic. So there are only really two things you need to understand when it comes to integrating n8n with AI. And the first you'll be quite familiar with. It just looks a little bit different than you're used to. So if you've ever used ChatGPT, you'll know the ChatGPT interface window. And what we do is we type in messages and we send a message and we receive a message back. Now that is called one-shot prompting. n8n have set up a node specifically for this called the basic LLM chain. So we go to the nodes panel up here, we go to the AI window here, and we can see the basic LLM chain. Once we click on that, it will open up and we'll see it presented as this like wider rectangle node. But you can think of this as just a ChatGPT interface, but it doesn't need to be ChatGPT. It could connect to Claude, it could connect to Gemini, any model that we want. So you can see immediately it's got this model plus icon down here. And when we click on that, we get access to all the different models, Google Gemini, Anthropic, we've got OpenAI, or we could use a service like OpenRouter, which we use most of the time to connect to any model we want. So OpenRouter just allows us to connect to any of these models under one API key. So say I want to connect to Claude, I can connect to Claude. Say I want to connect to Gemini, I connect to Gemini, etc. Now inside the basic LLM chain, we've got the source for the prompt. So every time we interact with AI and we give instructions, it's the prompt. And what we're doing here is just giving it instructions, exactly as we said. So what we're going to do is instead of connecting it to that chat trigger, we're going to define the prompt in here. So we've got a prompt, which is a user message, where we're going to put all of our inputs in, and we might pass in dynamic inputs, and we'll see that in a second. And then we've also got, if we want to, a system message. So the system message sits behind the LLM and says, this is the role that you're taking, and these are the actions I want you to take. So most of our prompt is actually going to be in this system message. We're going to pass in information there that's like every time I ask you a question, you are this type of responder. You are an AI news aggregator. You are a text classifier, all of those kind of things. And then we're just going to dynamically pass the inputs in as the user message here. There are some other things that we can do to make sure that we get consistent outputs, like connecting an output parser. So inside the model here, we have require specific output format. And it's exactly as it sounds. We can connect a specific output parser to this. So what we'd usually use is this structured output parser. So return data in a defined JSON format. And if we click on that, it says, actually, just show me the format that you want to return data in every time. So this example says state, California, and then it has an array of cities afterwards. So if we know exactly how we want the data returned, then we will put the structured output parser. And the benefit of this is then when we're dealing with complex processes and systems, is we can get this same output structure every time. So it's simple to deal with. It's very predetermined and deterministic there. What we've got here is an example of when we would use a basic LLM chain versus when we would use something like an AI agent. So let's start with the basic LLM chain. And like we've already said, it's like having ChatGPT inside your window, but you would use an LLM chain when you know what steps you want to take in advance. So it is the most reliable way to build because we've got predetermined steps. This would be an agentic workflow, not an AI agent workflow. So say, for example, we are reading the news. So we've got an RSS feed here, which is just basically going to push news from or pull news from the BBC. And you can see if I execute this step, it comes up with all of the latest news as of Wednesday, the 7th of Jan. It's got US discussing options to acquire Greenland, opposition leader, Russia sends Navy ships. So all of this relevant latest news as of now. So it's pulled the latest news articles. If I know I want my workflow to pull in news articles, classify whether those articles are to do with a topic, like AI, for example, then I can every time just push this RSS results into my basic LLM chain. And it's like me talking to ChatGPT and copy pasting things in and saying, is this to do with AI? Is this to do with cars? Is this to do with whatever? Whatever intent I have here, I can basically get it to do it on repeat for me automatically. So I could say every day, read the latest news, anything about AI. If there is anything about AI, we're going to put it through a different pathway and we're going to actually then post it on our socials, for example. So we've got this RSS feed coming in here, and then we're using some data manipulation because what we see is in the output, we have these 36 different items. So a nice clean output, but we don't really want to use or it's not necessary to prompt the AI 36 individual times. Instead, we're just going to combine that. So we're going to just use the aggregate node, combine it all into one list. And now we've got this condensed format that's actually just a JSON data structure that we're going to pass into our basic LLM chain. And we know every time we're going to take the same actions, which is just classifying the news. So we know the number of outcomes is predetermined. It doesn't have to work out what it's doing. We know what it's doing. It's classifying news. This will make sense in a minute when we come to the AI agent, where it actually determines its own steps. So if we go into the basic LLM chain, like we said, we're just pulling in the inputs in the user prompt. And then in the system prompt, we've given it a more comprehensive prompt. So we've given it a role. You're an AI news classifier that evaluates news headlines and determines whether they're related to AI. We've given it some constraints, which are the rules it must follow. When uncertain, default to false. Do not classify general technology news as AI relevant. Return results in the exact specified output format, which we're going to connect to it. We tell it it's got multiple news articles in the inputs, but we've not dynamically passed in the input in the system message. And then we said, here are your instructions. This is the output format we want. So a title, a URL to the article, and then is it AI relevant? Yes or no, or true or false. And that means we can then determine the path that is followed afterwards, and then some solutions. Now, this isn't the perfect prompt, but it's a starting point that we can work through and actually get to an 80% output so that we can iterate and test this. So we use a prompting guide or acronym called Critics. We're not going to cover that in this short course, but it's just a structure you can use every single time that's about constraints, role, inputs, what tools are you going to use, which isn't relevant for the LLM chain, but it is for the AI agent. What instructions should you give it, the conclusions or output format, and then solutions. So if the content is vague, default to false. So these are the exception use cases. And you can find more about Critics in the community in the link in the description below. We've got a whole section on how to write prompts really quickly using that Critics framework. We've also got a prompts generator that generates all these prompts for you, or an 80% version to start with. So we're going to pass in the data here. We're just going to drag and drop it, but you can see in the result, we've got a ton of these objects. So what we're saying is actually we've passed in a bunch of data objects here. So we just need to convert that to a string. So to go inside that object, we always hit dot, and then we can look at the different functions here by scrolling down. And I know that just from experience that I can basically turn this into text if I say to JSON string. And now if I scroll down here, I can see that I've got the text from the data input there. So what we're doing is passing in the inputs, we've given it a role, and we can execute that step for the output. So if we re-execute, it's going to use the model that's attached to it. And right now we've just attached OpenAI, we've connected our credentials through OpenRouter, and we're actually just connecting GPT-4o Mini. And to do this yourself, you just need to head to OpenAI API keys. You need to set up an account with OpenAI. We'll log in, we'll go to the API keys page, settings/organization/API-keys. We'll create a new secret key, give it a name, create that key, and then we will copy paste that key back in. Up here in our credential to connect with, we're going to create a new credential. We're going to put in our API key, and then we will leave the base URL as it is, leave everything else as it is, and save that account. The same is done if you want to connect to OpenRouter. However, you need to change the base URL if you're going to connect to OpenRouter to OpenRouter-API-v1, but you're still just pasting your API key in there. It's going to tell you if it's successful or not, and that's how you know and how you connect to those different API models, or AI models rather. And in our structured output parser, we've got what looks quite confusing compared to before. We saw generate from JSON example, which would just be telling it actually in your output, you're going to put something like this. And the other way, which is more rigid to define it, is actually saying every type of output. So this is just a more complicated way of saying, actually, we want an array. So like this, an output array with JSON objects inside. And we want the object properties to be title, URL, and AI relevant. And the type of that output is going to be a Boolean, false or true. The type of the URL is going to be a string. The type of the title is going to be a string, the text like we saw before. And you must every time put out title, URL, or AI relevant. The other way in which we could define this is like this state and cities. We could actually just paste in an example here. And we just get rid of all the spaces. And you'll see exactly what this looks like. So actually we could just instead have the JSON example, which is simpler, which is actually we know we want title, URL, and is it AI relevant? And we just put in an example there, and it will still action exactly the same. If we rerun that, you'll see that we'll get the same results. But as you get more complicated, you'd probably want to refer to this JSON schema, because you can specify types of output data, and therefore it's predetermined and a bit easier to get. And whilst that's loading, we can add an if statement to the end of this, because actually we know we only want to process data where the AI relevant is equal to true, because maybe we're just looking for AI relevant news. And we've hit an important point here, which is now that we've referred to this JSON example and not the JSON schema, we've actually got this error. Model output doesn't fit required format, which means it's struggling to actually put it in the required format. So the options are to go back to the JSON schema, but also we've got this autofix format here. The autofix format will make it a wider tool piece here, and we can actually connect that to a separate AI model, which means like if you don't get it right first time, try and auto-fix it, and you'll use some AI tokens to basically try and auto-fix it. So let's connect that. Let's try and run it again. And actually, sometimes you'll need this auto-fix format if it continuously fails to actually fix that format. But everything we're connecting to this is effectively a tool that the LLM chain or ChatGPT interface or Claude, however you want to think of it, can use. It's also important to note at this point, if we go into the basic LLM chain, we go into the settings, we've got these settings that basically determine should we retry on fail. So if, for example, it doesn't output the correct thing, and I can see right now it's output one item and not all of the items, should we try and retry that? And if so, how many times should we retry? And what happens if we don't actually successfully complete that? So we want to stop it on workflow. Do we want to take a route that notifies us? But here we're just going to retry and fail, get it to do 3 times. Does it fit the right output format? It seems to have output something here, but this is not correct. And we know this isn't correct. So I'm going to go back to the JSON schema we had before and paste that in. Because actually I saw that worked properly the first time. And if we try and rerun this here, let's see if we can get it to output correctly. Sometimes you just need a better LLM model. So right now I'm using a cheap model, GPT-4o Mini. Sometimes you just need to upgrade the model to something a bit smarter, a bit higher cost to get the outputs you're looking for, but you can start on a lower price model and work your way up. And that seems to have done the trick. So if I go in, it's green now. We've now got the 36 different articles and true or false under those. And if we run it through the next step, let's pin that data again with P, pin it with P there, which means we don't need to rerun it and spend money on tokens every time. What we can do is now run this step specifically, this if step. But one thing that we've done here incorrectly is actually we're passing one item through, but we want to split it out again into its 36 individual items. So we will go into the nodes panel. We'll use the split out here. And now that means we can actually say we want the individual outputs to be split out. Let's execute that step. And now we've got 36 items again being passed through to the true or false. And you can see that the 36 items have come through to true because we've not said that this AI relevant is equal to true is the condition. And we'll rename this if AI relevant is the condition. So let's rerun that. And now you can see that we've got one AI relevant news article and 35 false. And the one AI news relevant article, we can drag and drop these to see it, is NVIDIA unveils self-driving car tech as it seeks to power more products with AI. You can see all of the others are not AI relevant, so we are not interested in those articles. And therefore, I could only process that one article. So you can see by using the basic LLM chain, it's really powerful for predetermined steps or deterministic workflows. If we're going to run this same thing every single day, we want consistent outcomes. That's when we use the basic LLM chain. And before we move on to AI agents, I just want to show you in the nodes panel some of the other more specific basic LLM chains that n8n has available. So we have things like information extractor, question and answer chain, sentiment analysis, summarization chain, and text classifier. So let me show you text classifier as an example. If I click on text classifier, this could effectively do the same job that we are doing now through the basic LLM chain. So what it's saying is actually maybe we pass it into the text classifier and we say, here's your text. And then what we say is AI relevant, yes or no kind of thing. So all this text classifier is the basic LLM chain with its own prompt. So we've chosen to go in here and write our own prompt. And the prompt basically says you're a text classifier. The text classifier is just a pre-built block with a prompt that's already determined by the n8n team. The same as the information extractor. So what information should I extract from this? They're all just, as far as I understand, these LLM chains with a prompt written by the n8n team to do that for you. So I wouldn't worry about those. I'd always stick with doing your own prompts in the basic LLM chain, unless it's a really simple operation that can be fit by those. Now, what if we wanted the inputs to be a little bit more flexible and the outputs also to be more flexible? Now, of course, we could build out a complex predetermined workflow where we add more RSS feeds with more news sources coming in, and we allow the user to also change the inputs regarding maybe they don't want AI relevant news, maybe they want tech relevant news, or actually, in this case, where more judgment is required, we can use an AI agent. And also where we need access to potentially more tools. So we don't only need news reading, we need access to the weather, we need access to our Google Calendar to add events, where we need access to the conversation history for context. So it's not just a single run through the flow. It could potentially be multiple back and forth in a conversation or chat window with a user. In that case, we would refer to the AI agent instead, because actually it allows for more thorough thinking. It's not just if this, then do this. It's if this, then check the tools that you have available, determine the most suitable tool, and then actually use that tool to return the information and return that information in a certain format for me. When you need that more complex flow that's potentially a bit more variable on the inputs and outputs, we would refer to the AI agent, which is the second AI use case that you'll use inside n8n. So we go to the AI tab and we just click on the top one, AI agent here. It would open up again with a very similar window where we either connect it to a trigger node where we can have a chat with it. So a chat trigger node, this is called, one trigger we haven't seen yet, or we would enter the prompt directly below for that trigger node. And again, we can require that specific output format if we want to, and we enter the system prompt down here. So this system prompt is very simply in that same critics prompt format. You're an n8n demo AI agent. You have a tool set attached to you. We will define the tool set inside the tools themselves, and you'll see that in a moment. You will get user messages and questions in a conversation format. Your current date and time is, and then we've put this dynamic expression, which you can see on the right-hand side, is our current date and time. The available tools you have connected, which you will get the context from because it will be connected to it. You're going to receive the user input, analyze the request, decide if a tool is needed, present the results back to the user. So in this example, we might have, for example, an RSS feed, but actually instead of the RSS feed being just BBC News, we can actually use one of the BBC News, the CNN World Breaking News, TechCrunch for tech news, n8n's blog updates, Medline Plus for health topic and wellness updates. It's then able to determine, actually, I'll go and use any of these RSS feeds. If I'm asked, if the question is about tech stuff, maybe it will go and ask TechCrunch first rather than BBC News. So it's able to understand and actually think through a bit more cleverly what tool it's going to use and what inputs it's going to give to those tools. So if we wanted to attach any more tools to this, we can just click on the tool icon here. Tools always appear as this circular node style. And you can see that we've got loads of tools. We can even make API requests through there. We can call other n8n workflows, or we can just do something as simple as, RSS feeds, or update databases, or update our calendar, add events, send a Google Mail, anything like that. So anything that's a node is basically also accessible to an AI agent as a tool. But the importance here is actually the prompting is key and testing, because the reliability of this is going to be a lot less stable than something like this, which is predetermined, much easier, much more reliable to understand, and fits a given workflow if you know the steps. But this is where we don't necessarily know the steps. So we'll connect up the tools here that we've pre-built, and we've got one which gets the news. And you can see what we're basically doing is actually telling the AI that it can use any of these URLs and access the RSS feed from that URL. So gets the latest blog post about any RSS feed is the tool description, and the AI agent has access to that description. And this is a HTTP request instead, which is actually, we're going to use a service called Open Meteo, which will tell us the weather forecast. So the description we've got is get weather forecast anywhere, anytime. You can make requests by assuming most information. The only thing you need to know is the location. Use the city name to infer latitude and longitude automatically, and time period, assume today if not specified. It will pass into this API request the latitude, the longitude, and it will get that based on the location, the current weather, the hourly weather variables, the daily. So we basically determined a bunch of variables which it can go and get, or the AI agent will have access to. So it will understand when it's making a request to this endpoint, it is allowed to add all of these variables like daily, the start date, the end date, the temperature unit that you want returning, like degrees Celsius, etc. And that's because the API request requires those to be the parameters. The other thing that this might have access to that an LLM chain does not is memory. So if we click on the memory plus icon here, we can connect it to a simple memory or a longer formed memory, but we're just going to use this simple conversation memory. And inside that, we're just saying, actually, remember the last 30 things we've spoken back and forth together from the connected chat trigger nodes. We're not having to define any of the parameters there. It's already defined. And then the chat model, we're going to use, again, just OpenAI like we did before. And we'll just use GPT-4.1 mini just for demonstration's sake. But actually what we can now do inside n8n window, and we can also make this publicly accessible, is just this open chat. And what we can see is this chat window down here. So just say, hey, we'll open up a message here, and we've immediately got an error. This model is not supported in 2.2 version of the agent node. Please upgrade the agent node to the latest version. Brilliant. So I need to bring in, make sure I'm using the latest agent node, and I'll copy and paste the system message back in to here. Perhaps I'm using an outdated version here. So I'm just going to delete this and reconnect everything back up. And you might have this as well if you're watching this far in the future. Let's try it again. Just send another message, and now it seems to be working. We said, hey, and it said, hey there, how can I assist you today? Whether you have questions, need information, or want to explore some cool automation powered features, just let me know. So we'll say, what's the latest tech news? So you can see we're having more of a conversation this time, back and forth. It knows now to actually use the tool, Get News, and we can look at the logs of everything that's happened to it. So it said, okay, I'm going to check the memory first of our conversation. You can see that it's checked it a couple of times there. I'm going to use the AI model because I'm going to send a prompt back and forth. I'm then going to use the Get News, and what I'm going to do is put in the URL TechCrunch because that's probably going to give me tech news. So we're going to put in that URL and it's going to get that tech news back. And then it's going to basically say, okay, based on what we've returned from the Get News, which is the output here on the right-hand side, we can see this is the latest tech news over here. Based on that, I'm going to return to the chat window, and this is what it's doing here. Here's some of the latest tech news, McKinsey, Meta's Manus, etc., etc. So it gives a bunch of tech news back to the AI agent. The AI agent then says, okay, I'm going to summarize that for the user. Here are some of the latest tech news highlights from TechCrunch, McKinsey, Meta's Manus, and it's even got read more topics with the links to that. So the format is very open here, and that's why an AI agent is perfect. We can also say, what's the weather in Bristol, UK today in Celsius? And it will know now whether it gets it correct or not to use the weather tool. And it tried to use the weather tool, but actually it says that there were some parameters that it could not get correctly. And it's tried to define basically the longitude, latitude, the temperature, and it's basically said we failed to do that. So this is one of the issues with AI agents is actually if you don't specify the inputs really well, then you might get failures like this. And because we've got that memory attached, we can just say try again instead of what's the weather in Bristol, UK today. So it's more of a conversation. It's like, what am I trying again? Oh, I'm trying to get the news or get the weather. And it's, maybe misunderstood because it's gone and got the news again. Let's try weather in London. And it's basically saying you've passed in the incorrect parameters. And this looks quite complicated, but basically if we went to the API documentation, we'd be able to determine that actually one of these parameters that we're passing in is probably incorrect. And what we can do is we can actually go to the logs and see what we were passing in. So parameter 0, which was latitude or longitude, parameters 2 value was temperature _2 meters, wind speed _10 meters, rain. And if we go back in there, we can see parameters 0, parameter 1, parameter 2. So it's basically saying that parameter 2 or 3 is incorrect. It's hard to say without looking deep into it, but we could connect something else like our Gmail account, for example. And we could give that tool the ability to get my last messages. And now the tool has automatically adapted because we've said, check the tool descriptions that you've got attached to it. And we can say, get the last email I had and tell me the subject line. And it knows to get many messages in Gmail without me having to reprompt it or add steps. It's very, very adaptable. And that's the power in these AI agents. And it's going to go and actually get many messages from my Gmail and hopefully return the last email and just pull the subject line back. So I had to go inside that and just change the limit down to 5. I accidentally got it to return all of my emails. But actually what we should either do is let the model define this parameter. So this lets AI decide whether we return all or return 5 or whatever. But actually, in this case, I just know I want the last email. So I've limited it to 5. And it's basically pulled out the last emails I've got. And the last one was, thank you for reaching out to Linus Tech Nest there. That shows you the power in an AI agent when you want those flexible outputs, but also shows you that actually every action that it takes has clear execution logs, and you can see exactly what happened, the inputs, the outputs, etc., for every step of the way. So when it was getting many messages, we can see the input and we can see the output. So it basically said from the chat input, get the last email. What it's going to do is actually send a message to this tool down here, and that has returned the last 5 emails down there as well. So we can close that panel, hit save. So there you have it. That is most the theory that you need to understand about n8n. So let's now jump into some actual practical builds that are going to save you time day to day. So we're going to do 2 builds that are going to take maximum 20 minutes each. And the idea here is to take a task that you probably do already in ChatGPT and make that automatic so that it happens for you on repeat without that manual copy and pasting between your apps. So the first one we're going to start with is writing social media content for you. So we have a diagram here, a whiteboard diagram, and on the left-hand side, you can see that this is the flow that you're probably taking to create social media content right now. I know I certainly was before I discovered n8n. So we've got this manual ChatGPT flow where we are looking for content ideas on LinkedIn, whether that's our previous content, whether that's people we know and aspire to be like's content. We are copying that content, we're pasting it into ChatGPT, or maybe you're not even doing this step and actually what you're doing is just typing ideas into ChatGPT. We are writing the prompt every time. Write some content ideas for me, try and make it sound like me, and not necessarily giving that context of what we sound like, or maybe we're pasting in some previous posts. We're then waiting for ChatGPT to output, which although probably only takes 30 seconds, we are going back and forth between then. And then we are actually just copying and pasting those, doing manual edits, most likely because it doesn't sound particularly like us. And then we are putting that onto LinkedIn. We're then scheduling it through LinkedIn. So that process is very repetitive. We're going between multiple apps. And actually what we can do is create an automated workflow in less than 20 minutes. That's just going to be every Monday morning. It's going to scan content that we like, whether that's our previous posts or other people's posts. It's going to generate 5 ideas for us and actually write those ideas out. And then it's going to store them in a Google Sheet. So all we need to do instead of this long drawn out process on the left is go to our Google Sheet on Monday morning, say, hang on, I like that idea. Let's take that, let's copy paste it into LinkedIn and let's post it. And this is applicable for any social media content. And it just gives you a flavor of the kind of thing that you can automate with these n8n workflows, and it won't take long at all. So let's jump back into our n8n environment. We're going to go on create workflow. And the first thing we do with every workflow build, or at least my planning process, is to actually just draw out some notes. So we're going to either go up here and type in sticky note or use Shift S to draw a note. And what we're going to do is just plan out quickly what we call the bookends, which are the start and end of the flow. So we're saying Monday morning, (9 a.m. That's our trigger. So every Monday, we want this to run automatically. And the output is going to be content posts in a Google Sheet. Then what we're doing effectively is just working out the inputs and outputs that get us there. So we know from looking at the triggers already that if we go up here, we've got on a schedule. So on a schedule, we can basically say for the schedule trigger, every day, 1 day between the trigger at 9 a.m. on Monday morning, we're going to trigger this. And I'm just going to rename this 9 a.m. daily. And we're going to pull that into that note there. And we know at the end here, we want to output that into our Google Sheet. So we'll go to the nodes panel and we'll just type in Google and we will come down here to our Google Sheet. And we know that at this point, we want to update or append rows in a sheet that's already existing. So we'll have append or update row in sheet. And right now, let's not connect it to any credentials. We can always come back to this. We're going to disconnect those two and make sure that our output is append or update row in sheet. Now we need to figure out what's happening in the middle, and then we can actually work out what we need to do to the data to get between these 2 points. So if we take the notes and we copy paste them, there's probably going to be 2 key steps here. So to get to content posts, we need to actually generate the ideas. So we're going to work backwards from the output. So let's put a step for generate ideas with AI. And by generate ideas, we mean the actual content post itself in that LinkedIn or Instagram format, whatever platform we're using there. So we want to generate the ideas with AI, but first we need inspiration. So we'll just put get inspiration. And what we're going to use for this is a service that can scrape LinkedIn, it can scrape TikTok, it can scrape any of those. So we're going to go to a service called Appify, and it's appify.com. And this service is basically a bunch of different scrapers. So an option here would be to actually type in LinkedIn up here and search for the actions here. So can we pull our previous post? Can we pull posts from other people? But when I type in the LinkedIn node, I can see that I can only create a post. So what I'm going to need to use is an external service that helps me get the posts. Now I can either create my own scraper, which would probably take days, or I can use the service on Appify, which basically has safe and secure scrapers from other users that have been created. So what I'm going to do is come in here and type in LinkedIn, and I can see that immediately we've got a bunch of different scrapers. Look, 2,239 called actors that are basically going to help us get this data. Extract full LinkedIn profile insights, verified emails, phone numbers. So maybe I'm saying LinkedIn posts, LinkedIn profile post scraper, and you can see here that we have basically all these different things that we can use with their ranking, how many people are using them. So we have like social proof of which ones might be good for us. So I'm going to put in LinkedIn profile post scraper, and the importance here is it's got no cookies. So what this means for us is LinkedIn is really tight on what we can and can't do with our profile. So you don't want to be scraping thousands of pieces of data using your own login details on LinkedIn. You'd rather use something with no cookies that doesn't trace back to you, so that actually you can pull information as much as you want without getting banned or without the risk of getting banned. So on here, we have various different things. We have $5 per 1,000 results, which seems very reasonable, but don't worry, we can start a free trial with Appify for this. So what we're going to do is sign up for a profile here, go to console, and then come back to this scraper, which is appify.com/API maestro /LinkedIn profile post. So once you've signed up, you'll be able to try this for free. You get $5 a month for free with every Appify plan that you use. And if you use my code in the description below, 25Simon, all in caps, you'll get 25% off any paid plans as well. So that's optional to use. So once you come into the console here, it looks a little bit complex, but actually it's very simple. What we can basically see is what we need to input, things like profile, username or URL, different pages of their data. And then we will also be able to see how we can actually get results back from this. So if we click on the input JSON here and we go and find, for example, my LinkedIn profile, I'll go to my profile, I'll copy and paste my name in here. So we're going to paste in the URL basically, and we can then see that the URL input is going to be just username Simon, or username and then the URL. But if we go to integrations, and we scroll down to the bottom, we can see use API endpoints. So what we're trying to do is actually use our Appify API endpoints. And what we're able to do is once we've set up a token through here, through manage tokens, you set up an API token, you'll be able to run this synchronously and get the dataset items, i.e. we're going to ask it to retrieve information about my LinkedIn profile, and it's going to return it all in the same node run. So what I can do is copy this here, and this will copy with your token, if you've created a token up here, on the endpoint. So we talked about endpoints before. It's just URLs where we're saying, give me this data. So we are doing a post request here to get data, and we're doing a post request because we are sending data, but then we're also getting data back. So we're going to copy that. We'll come back to our workflow here. And what we're going to do is open up the nodes panel and type in HTTP request. That's just a way to set up any API request. So I'm going to double click into this. I'm going to copy paste inside the URL here, exactly what we've just done. And you can see that it's got the full URL that we've got here. And it also appends my token to the end here. Token equals Apify API. And by the time you watch this, I'll have removed the Apify token. Don't share this with anyone because then they can use your account. What this means is we need no authentication here, but we do need to send a profile in the body parameters here. So if we click send body and we'll go back to the screen up here, we'll go to inputs. And now I've entered this example demo in here. I can go to JSON and I can see that this is the only input that I actually need inside here. And maybe we'll also just restrict it so we're not pulling thousands of posts. Let's just pull from page number 1 and let's do a result limit of 10. And then if I go to the JSON, I can see that it's now populated that. And this is the body of our request. This is what we're asking for from this actor. So we'll go back to our workflow, and inside the HTTP request, instead of using the fields below, we'll say using JSON. And what we will do is just copy paste. We'll turn it to an expression. We'll copy paste the static value from now into here, which is my username, page 1, limit 10. And what we can actually do is just rename that. And we'll rename it LinkedIn Scraper. And we can just execute that just to check it's actually working. And it's going to go through the loading symbol and you can see it's returned 10 items. It looks a bit complicated, but we've got the text of our posts. It's a repost. This was the original author. This is the stats of the likes, the total reactions, etc. This is the media that was attached. And you can see that I could separate out, in fact, it's already separated out 10 items in there. So I can turn it into a table and I can see all of the different details for the post that I've created. And what we can do is feed that into our generate ideas with AI there. Now we're 10 minutes into the build and we've already gathered the LinkedIn information or the posts, but I want to show you something very important for future-proofing your builds, which is actually authentication. So I noted before that we have the token in our URL back here, but what we should do is actually after the question mark, take all of this information, copy it and get it out of that URL, because I want to teach you about safe authentication, which is keeping your credentials safe. If I ever shared this workflow with you guys, then you would actually see my token and be able to use it. So you don't want that to happen to you. So we'll go into authentication and we're just going to use a generic credential type. So we're going to actually use query auth for this. So a lot of services will use a header auth, which means we send the credentials in the header of the request and it's encrypted in that. However, we know if it's in the URL after a question mark that actually this is in the query. This is called the query, basically. So we know we're using a query auth. We're going to go down and we're going to use create new credential. We'll call it Apify query auth. And what we're effectively going to do is copy paste everything we had before in here. Everything after the question mark is what we want to take. And we're basically going to say token is the name. And then I'm going to copy paste the value in there. You can see it's already encrypting and we will save that. And what that's saying is append question mark token equals this value to our query, but encrypt it. So now I will rerun the same step and it should produce the same results where we get the results back. But instead, nobody, when I share this workflow, will be able to see my API key. So we have the last posts from our profile. What we're going to do now is generate those ideas with AI. So we talked through before, do we need an LLM chain or do we need an AI agent? Well, for this, we're not necessarily going out and getting loads of research. We've already pulled in the information from the LinkedIn. So we're probably just going to need that LLM chain, the basic LLM chain, and we're going to define the prompt in here. So we're going to connect this up. And you see, every time I open a node, I'll always position it. I will work out where it's going to be, what is the input flow, what's the output flow, and then connect them all up. For the sake of not using all your credits, I'd hit P on your keyboard to pin that data, and that just stores that all there so that when we rerun it, it's not going to use our tokens every time. We're going to connect this up to the basic LLM chain. So we're going to add a model in here. If you've not started with any OpenAI Anthropic or anything like that yet, I'd recommend checking out OpenRouter first, where we can use any different models. So you're going to go to openrouter.ai. You're going to go to set up an account. You're going to add a bit of credit in there. You're going to create an API key. And I'll call mine demo. I'll give it a limit. I'll tell it to reset. Oh no, actually, I will not tell it to reset daily. And I'll give it an expiration of an hour so that nobody can take it after this. But we're going to copy that new key. We're going to come back to our n8n workflow, and we're going to set up the credential in the OpenRouter chat model. We're going to paste in the API key. We'll keep it as OpenRouter account, but add demo for this so that I can delete it afterwards. It tested and connected there. And what we're going to do is just connect to any model we want here. And I'd recommend actually using Gemini 3 Pro Preview because it's fairly cost effective and very good at creative writing. The reason I know that is if you go to lmarena.ai, this is a socially proofed way of checking the best models for certain use cases. I'll go to leaderboard and I will scroll down to the bottom and I'll see that actually there's this arena overview. And for creative writing, Gemini 3 Pro, ranked by 100,000 people, is first with creative writing. So it already tells me for cheap that actually that's going to be a really good model. I'm going to name this Gemini 3 Pro. And what we have there is the basic LLM chain connected up to a model, connected to our input data, and we are inputting 10 items in here. So do we want to create an individual post each time for every single item that we put in? Probably not. We want to take inspiration from the items that we're putting in and then create a post. So what we're going to do is aggregate that information, come back out, connect it up. We're going to aggregate that information. And what we are actually looking for is the text of the posts. So we've dragged that text in, we'll execute the step, and you can see now we've got one big table with all of the different text there. And this is basically our aggregate information of all the posts that we want to get inspiration from. We'll connect that up to our basic LLM chain. And what we need to do now is enter a prompt to say, take the information from the input and generate 5 social media ideas or 10 social media ideas. Now, in order to generate a prompt, it's very simple, especially for something this simple. I personally already have a prompt generator, which you can access if you go to the paid community in the description, school.com/scrapes, go to the resource hub in the classroom, and we've got this prompt generator that we share with everyone. It just outputs an 80% version of the prompt every time. So I've set that up as a Claude project and it's going to generate a prompt for me. And I'm just going to type in exactly what we want to generate here. Take the inputs of 10 previous social media posts and turn those into new content pieces that are tangential to those. So we've got our prompts there. And what we're going to do is actually just run that because it's connected to our prompt generator. If you don't have the prompt generator and don't want to access the paid community, then what you can do is just go to something like Gemini, Claude, or ChatGPT, whichever is your favorite, give it a similar input and say, create me a prompt for that, including a role, describing the inputs, etc. And I'm just going to say, keep it concise. This is a very simple use case. So we're going to keep it concise. It's going to output a prompt for me. We can run through that in a second. And the prompt generator will actually go through and ask me a few clarifying questions. So I'll go through those first. We'll answer the questions. It will come back with a prompt. And then what we'll do is we'll take that. You can see it writing that out now. We'll take that and we'll put that inside the system message. And then we will make sure the inputs are passed in like this into the user message. So what we can do is just type in inputs like this, and you can see by dragging in the text there, we've dragged in each individual post from here. And we could get all complicated and say, you know, this is text post 1, this is text post 2, but actually we're just keeping it very straightforward. It's going to understand the break in context between the last 9 posts or whatever that I've made. So let's go and grab the prompts now. You can see when we use this prompt generator, it generates it in a really readable format. You're a LinkedIn content strategist. Keep all posts within LinkedIn's 3,000 character limit. Aim for 150 to 300 words. Preserve the brand voice from the original text. So it's going to preserve brand voice from what we put in. The inputs are going to be an array of 10 previous LinkedIn posts. Analyze the original post. Identify adjacent concepts. Generate tangential content, and it's given some rules around that. Quality check it against the requirements. And then we've also got in this prompt generator, the JSON to output. So it's going to say, this is the post. So what we're going to do is actually just go back and say, require specific output format. And if you remember, we're doing this because actually each time we want to update in the Google Sheet in exactly the same format. So in the output parser, we'll put the structured output parser. And what we're going to do is just, instead of using the JSON schema this time, we're going to use a JSON example. And we'll have something like this that we can paste in. So it's going to be an array under posts, each post text, where we have, your first text, your second post, your third post, whatever. So now we can actually run that through and see if that's working and then pin that to that. So let's connect this up. We can now execute the workflow to give it a test by either clicking here or down below, and let's see what it comes back with. And whilst that's loading, we can set up our Google Sheet. So we're going to create a new credential. And one of the benefits of using n8n Cloud is the setup is really simple. We're just going to sign in with Google here, choose an account, and the connection is going to connect there. We're going to go and set up a blank Google spreadsheet, and we're going to take the URL of that spreadsheet. We'll call it social media posts here. And we'll take that back and we'll say, okay, let's get the sheet updated by through this URL, the document, and then also the sheet. So you can just paste the URL in and it will go and find the columns inside there. So let's start adding columns. And if we rename this sheet, posts, and we're going to say date, post content, and we're going to say approved/not approved. And we're just going to keep it super basic for now. We're going to add the date, add the post content, and then we'll have a process of approving or not approving each of those. So if we come back here and we refresh, it's going to now understand that there are columns, and we come back out and we can see that our basic LLM chain has now performed its action. We can pin that data to the basic LLM chain by clicking on it. And you can see that we've got multiple output text posts here. Each we're going to have to split out. So let's use our split out node, and we're going to drag in that we're going to split out posts, and then each post is going to form its own individual item there, so that we're going to update our post content by dragging in post text here. Not approved/approved. We don't need to have that field there because that's a manual thing in our sheet. And then what we're going to do is add an expression here for the date. So we're going to type in the curly brackets. We're going to put now or $now, and that's going to give us a date time. And then we've got a little trick where we can hit .format, and we can format the date time to today's date. So you can put it in whatever format you want, but what we're effectively doing here, and I want to clean it up a bit, is just put DD in there, and it will say 9th of Jan 2026. And what we're going to do is run that through. Let's execute the workflow. It will execute really quickly because actually all of this data is pinned, and it says error because the column to match on parameter is required. So because we've used append or update row instead of just append row, it's saying I need to check if there's already this post existing. So we're going to match on the column post content, which is basically going to say if this post already exists, don't add it. So we're going to execute the workflow. It's going to add the 10 items. And if we go to our Google Sheet, we can see those 10 tangential posts that are now being produced for our content. And we can expand this out a little bit. And we basically now have 10 LinkedIn post content ideas that we can go and just copy paste. They're already in our format, tangential content from either our profile or other people's profile that we can go and post on LinkedIn straight away. And this is very similar to my content. It's talking about SaaS tools, AI, n8n, the skill gap, isn't about writing code, it's about systems architecture. AI reduces a 4-hour deliverable to 12 minutes and all of that good stuff there. So it's not perfect, but it's replaced a process that we could do every single day to something that would just take you a few minutes to come in here and approve or not approve, and then copy paste it directly to your LinkedIn. And we've done that super, super quickly and got our first workflow ready. And not only that, you've applied a lot of the fundamentals that we spoke through. So we've mapped out the process. We've got a trigger node. We've actually used an external API, although I can understand if that's hard to follow at first, but that will become easier as you do more of them. We've actually manipulated some data. We've used AI and actually input a prompt and talked about prompt generators. And then we've actually put it into an external service where we can store and use it. And all of this is available to use again and again. So the one thing that we've missed here is actually publishing this workflow. So if we publish this, click on publish, click publish here, it means that the schedule trigger will now trigger executions on the schedule we've defined. So every single day now, this will schedule 9 a.m. daily unless we go and unschedule it or unpublish it up here. If we make any changes, we can save the changes without publishing it. And if we want to actually make the changes publish, we then go and publish those changes again. So say, for example, I wanted to change this to 10 a.m. It would give me the ability to publish that again. But if I save it, it will not run at 10 a.m. It will continue to run at 9 a.m. until I republish that workflow. Okay, so use case number 2 is accessing AI wherever you work. So you're probably going back and forth between the ChatGPT interface. Maybe it's Microsoft Teams, maybe it's Slack, maybe it's other apps. But what we want to do is stop from going back and forth and copying and pasting and just actually show you the power of integrating AI into where you already work. So we're going to use the example of Slack, where we go from this manual process of going into Slack, doing something like rewriting some text in your brand voice. So you might go to ChatGPT and say, actually rewrite this, make it sound more persuasive, rewrite it in my brand voice using these terms instead. And then again, you wait for the output, you copy and paste that polished text back into your own app with maybe a few edits. But why not just bring that process into one app in the first place and just actually connect AI to where you already work, which is Microsoft Teams or Slack. So let's show you how we do that inside Slack. So we're going to duplicate this here and we'll call it Slack agent. And the importance of seeing this in Slack is that actually this applies to any other system that you want to get AI inside. The logic is exactly the same. So we're going to get rid of everything we've got so far for this Slack agent, but perhaps we're going to keep this LLM chain in the middle here, and we're just going to change the text here. So we're going to have a Slack trigger. So at the start of the process, we're going to be alerted that there's some message come through, and that's going to be a trigger. So we're going to open that up and type in Slack, and we can go down and we can see the triggers on here. And we might say on any event on a bot app mention. So let's say on a bot app mention, we're going to trigger that. And in the end, what we want to do is repost the response to Slack. So we're going to send a message. So we're going to type in Slack, message actions, send a message. So the end result here is actually going to be sending a message. We'll change the text up here, send a response. We're going to generate a response, and then that's going to be the reply to the user. So we might not have this middle stage, but I imagine we're going to need some sort of condition in here to check that it's a user sending a message and not the bot itself sending it. So what we need to do is set up that connection to our Slack trigger. So we're going to go into the Slack trigger. We're going to go into more info on setting up this credential, because if you go into create new credential, you see we need an access token to get into that. So we'll go more info, we'll go into the n8n docs, and it will say you can find authentication information for this node here. So we're going to click on that. We're going to go to our Slack API apps page. So you can actually just go directly to api.slack.com/apps. And what we're going to do is create a new app here from scratch. We're just going to name it something like Super Service. We're going to select the workspace that it's connected to, And what that's going to do is take us to a configuration page where we need to go to OAuth and permissions. And what we're doing is setting the permissions for this bot so that it can actually access the right things. And we're going to add a bunch of scopes, and I'll come back and show you which ones in a moment. So add the following scopes: apps mention read, channels join, so it can join public channels. It can read the channel information, otherwise we won't be able to find the right channels. It can send messages as the app, and it can read information about groups that it's been added to. So add those scopes, but you can also add any other scopes you want by scrolling down the list, looking at the description and deciding what you want in there. We're going to scroll back up after the scopes, and we're going to install to Scrapes HQ or whatever it says there for you, and then it will give you a bot token. So we're going to hit install. It's going to come up with a page that gives us the ability to allow it access to our Slack instance. And once we've given it that, we will get that bot token, which we'll copy, and we will take that back to our workflow, and we'll use it to test sending an actual message. So deactivate that Slack trigger. We'll use it first inside here in send a message, create new credential. And what we're going to use is the access token, paste that bot token in there, save it, and we're going to give it a name, demo. So it says it's connected successfully. And then now if we click on channel, we should be able to, because we've given it access to read the channels, read the different channels in our Slack instance. So we're going to get it to send a message to chat. And if I go to the Slack instance here inside chat, we'll say test message from bot, and we're going to execute that step. And at the moment it's saying it's not in the channel. So what we need to do is just add that to the channel. So we'll go to integrations in the settings, we'll add an app, and we're going to type in super service. So it needs to be inside the channel to actually be able to send the message. We'll execute that step again, and now it should send a message. There we go, test message from bot, automated with this n8n workflow. So if we add an option, we can actually get it to remove that link by going include link to workflow and untoggling that message there. So now we know we've actually connected that there. What we need to do is make sure that we've set up a Slack trigger so that whenever we mention the bot, it can actually receive that information. So we've got the Slack account demo still set up there, and it has a list of channels to watch. So we're going to ask it to watch the chat channel and trigger on bot/app mention. But right now this won't do anything until we go and set up the correct event subscriptions. So we're going to come back to the interface here. We're going to go to event subscriptions down here, and we're going to tick that on. And what we need to do is make sure that we're subscribing to certain bot events, and it's the app mention. So whenever we mention the app's name, it's going to receive an event. And to enable that, we need to make sure that it's connected to our service. So what we need to do is actually come back in here. We're going to go to our webhook URLs and click on copy on the test URL. We'll take it back to the request URL up here, and we're going to paste that in, and that will reject at first because we've not activated our trigger. So what we need to do is execute this step. It's now listening for an event, and we'll click retry, and now that should be completely verified. Alternatively, we can make our app public and use the production URL. So we can come back in here, stop listening there. We use the production URL. We will publish our app so that our production URL is accessible. And then we'll go back and actually put in our public URL. And now you can see that that's been verified as well. So now we can use it without actually having to use it on a test account. We'll save changes there. So now it should be set up to actually receive our message. Let's go into our own Slack instance and let's just test here. We'll say hello, and actually nothing's going to happen. No executions are going to take place because we've not mentioned the bot at all. But if we come in here and we say super service, how are you? Then what we're going to see in the execution history is that actually just now we've received a trigger. So it's not going to respond yet, but what we're looking for is that actually this has actually received some mention. So it's been triggered, which means actually the text has been sent through from me, and it now has all of our text that we can basically process. So We've sent a message into Slack. We know that works. We've also received a message on an app mention. So now we need to put it all together with generating a response using AI. So say we want it to actually generate something or rephrase some text in our brand voice. Then what we're going to do is connect it up to the basic LLM chain. And for now, we're going to move this condition out of the way. We'll move that across. And what we're basically going to do is actually make it a bit more advanced. And what we're going to do is connect it to a memory so it understands what we've previously spoken about, but also connect it to a research tool. So instead of an LLM chain, we're probably going to need, or we're definitely going to need that AI agent tool with the prompts defined below. So we're going to switch out the basic LLM chain for that AI agent, but we're going to connect it to the same chat model, and we're going to give it a simple memory here that we saw before. Give it a context window of 10 so it can read the last 10 messages we've sent. And then we're going to need to change the structured output parser here. But we're also going to give it access to an external tool. And you don't have to do this if you don't want to, but I'm going to give it access to Perplexity, which is an external service that will allow it to take research actions. So actually it can go and do internet searches for us. So we're going to create a new credential, go and set up a Perplexity account. And this is paid, so it's only if you want to do this section. We're going to go to the API keys, accept the terms and generate an API key. We're going to create that key, copy it, take it back, paste it, save it. And once you've set up that account, that will confirm that it's successfully connected. And now what we can do is message a specific model, but we're going to let the model define this parameter. So we're just going to tell it in the prompt, send this message if you want to conduct research, and we'll call it research tool so that we can easily refer to it in the prompt. And for now, we're having no structured output parser because it's just going to be a message sent back to the user here. So we've got the bot app mention, we've got the AI agent connected to the research tool with no prompt at the moment, and it's going to send a return message to the user to that channel. Let's just make sure that it's to the right channel. And we could obviously connect that dynamically to the channel that the input is coming from, but we'll keep it simple for now. It's going to send back a simple text message, and that message is going to be the output of whatever the AI agent has here. So we'll go back in and we'll put JSON.output for now, and we'll see if that comes through. But the one thing we need to define is actually that prompt, the user prompt, and the system message inside here to make sure it's actually responding to the message. And we also need to make sure it has access to the input chat text. So we're not interested in what user was there. So actually we're just going to grab the text from here. How are you? And the system message can stay as a "you are a helpful assistant" for now. We just want to check that full flow works. So we'll mention the bot in Slack. We'll say, "How are you?" And it now should send that response, providing that actually we've set this all up correctly, but we'll go to executions to check. And I've made the key mistake that actually I have not published the latest workflow. So I need to come up, publish, and we'll try again. And you can see a lot of this is just iterating and testing, and we'll message it again. We'll come back, we'll check the executions, and we can see that there was an error, probably in the way I've referenced the output. And actually it's an error with the way the memory subnode is working. So what we're going to do for now is actually, normally the memory works on the previous chat trigger node. So because actually the memory is stored inside Slack, it's a little bit more complicated, and we're just going to remove that tool for now, have no memory connected to it, and just have it as a single interaction. We can come back to that in a separate tutorial. So let's try and rerun it. So the great thing about this is we can rerun it directly from within the workflow now, and then that's going to give us an output, and hopefully we've referenced that output correctly. Yes, we have JSON.output there. And if we go back to our Slack, it's come back with, "I'm doing well, thank you for asking. How can I help you today?" Now, some advancements on this is we can actually reply to that message directly under a thread. So we can go reply to a message, and then message timestamp to reply to. If we look at the inputs here, the timestamp will be available. We've got the event _TS, we can put it in there so that next time we contact it, it's actually going to put it in a thread. And what we're going to also do is update this now, the system message here, and we're going to go back to our prompts generator in Claude because I know it's set up to give things like tools in the input. So I've asked it to come up with a prompt. It has a research tool attached, so I told it what tools it can access. You're going to create a prompt that's concise. It takes a user query, works out whether it needs research, and if it does, it's going to send a single query to our research tool. If it doesn't, it's just going to use its own knowledge base. You're going to follow a tone of voice guide, so it's going to be in your brand voice, and you can add your own brand voice to here. We've just got 5 bullet points defining a different brand voice, like being casual, use contractions, so talk like a human, keep it really real and relatable. We're going to copy that prompt. It doesn't matter about the exact prompt. It's just having something that says, yeah, you have a research tool attached. Use it if you need to conduct research. Don't use it if you don't need to conduct research, and also follow this tone of voice. That is the simplicity of that prompt. It's just we've used our generator to output it there. Now, one important thing is to turn this to an expression. And in the inputs, I would always add today's date if I'm wanting some relevant information. And we can say, again, in the curly braces, now. And it will now understand that we are today's date, and we're still passing in the user message. So what we'll put is just a little title here to make it clear: inputs, user message, and then we'll pass dynamically in the message. So now it knows it has access to that tool. We're going to delete the memory, and now it can actually probably go out and use that tool if it needs to. So we've got a little research agent inside our n8n workflow, which is inside our Slack or our Microsoft Teams. So we're going to publish it. And now let's try it out. Let's get rid of the condition, save. And it should now reply within the thread. Super service, are you there? And we'll get the reply within the thread. There we go, it's popped up. Hi there, yeah, I'm here. I'm ready to help, what's on your mind? But we need to tag it every time. Super service, what's the date today? So it actually needs to understand, or like it's got that in its context. It's January the 9th, 2026. So we're going to say super service, and you write out a LinkedIn post about n8n 2.0 and the changes in my tone of voice. So you can start to see, if you're asking questions like this, how you could actually kind of integrate an agent where you work, but also do tasks that you normally go to ChatGPT for. Now, you could, of course, probably install an app which is ChatGPT directly on this. But what you couldn't do if you weren't using something like n8n is actually connect it to all your other tools. So maybe you connect this to an agent that can actually add things to your calendar or create a draft in your Gmail for you. So there's lots of things that actually you could do here in the places you already work that you cannot do through ChatGPT currently, that you can do by connecting something using AI automation and n8n. And this is probably taking a bit longer because it's a bit longer, and you see it's come back here. Since n8n 2 dropped pretty recently, it's definitely worth talking about. So it knows when it dropped because it's gone and done the research. It's mostly an under the hood upgrade. And then basically it's come back with 3 options for us. Best if you want to sound authentic and cut through the hype. Finally, an update that isn't about new features. Everybody loves a shiny new feature release. So you can see the power of this. Actually, I'm now talking inside where I work every day and getting messages straight away. So I don't need to switch apps, and I can connect it to other apps as well. And if we go back to the executions here, we'll be able to see that it called on the research tool and actually pulled information. So it's 42 seconds it took to respond, and it called on the research tool once, and I can actually go into copy to editor. And if I go inside there and we have the logs down here, I can see, if I pull this up, exactly what message it sent to the research tool. And the message it sent was n8n 2.0 release date, features, changes, AI capabilities. And it sent that to the research tool and then returned that, and then basically said, actually write out this message for us. So it sent that to the research tool and then wrote out that full message with the options on LinkedIn for us as well. So we're going to save that. We're going to republish the changes. And that is it for your second workflow. You've now built a Slack agent inside where you work every day that can connect to multiple apps. So congratulations on finishing that second workflow. You've now got a real flavor of how you would integrate various apps and save yourself lots of manual steps using an automation platform like n8n. Now, I just wanted to finish off by showing you some of the possibilities of where you could go next and to give you some inspiration on how complex or comprehensive these systems can be. So these are all systems that we've built out that are designed for business growth. So when we say growth system, we mean anything from helping you with your social media marketing to your SEO content generation to paid advertising and more. We've built out lots of comprehensive systems to help you generate those leads, generate traffic for your business inside our school community. For example, we've got an SEO content writing system that writes 3,000 word, fully researched, internally linked and externally linked articles that are SEO optimized. They also contain images published directly to your WordPress, etc. So you can see how this would save you thousands of hours of actually writing it yourself or paying manually for a writer to do this. We've got lead gen army systems, which help you generate leads not only through things like Apollo and other lead gen databases, but also through warm outreach on your own LinkedIn. We've got a paid ads creation system. So how can you actually emulate successful ads that are performing? And all of these systems are much bigger than the ones we built today. They're kind of 5 to 15 workflows that all connect and interlink together to replace and augment actual systems so that you only have to supervise the work. You don't have to do all the manual grunt work yourself. And then finally, for our VIP members, we also have this LinkedIn content generation system, which is a huge extension on what you've built out today, which generates not only the post body in your brand voice, and we have a real focus on actually making it your own brand voice, but also consistent image generation through generated carousels, images, infographics in certain styles, and then it connects automatically to your LinkedIn or to your Instagram or whatever you want to connect it to. So hopefully this today has given you a flavor of how to build out n8n. Well done if you stuck with us for this far. The knowledge that you've taken away today is 2 years of learning condensed into just a 2-hour course. So I'm excited for what you're going to be able to build out in the future using these skills and knowledge. If you found the content valuable today, then please leave a comment down below and give the video a like and subscribe to the channel. It really helps me take the next step up and continue to deliver this kind of content. Now, if you're interested in digging into more of this stuff, I'm going to leave a video linked right above now.